Welcome, Third Rock listeners, to the Branding Laboratory. I'm your host, Deevo, Chief Experience Officer for the Brand Storyteller and the Fusion Creative Brands. And each week, I have the privilege of speaking with extraordinary leaders and entrepreneurs who are reshaping the way industries work. These conversations go way beyond the surface to explore the core philosophies, the lessons, and the challenges that define the brands that we admire today. And one of the greatest rewards of this podcast is the opportunity to share the insights of some of the brightest minds in business, people who are passionate about pushing boundaries and redefining what's possible. And as I always say, the stories we tell are the brands we build. And this show is a testament to the power of that concept. Let's dive in. In today's episode, I'm really excited to sit down with Danny Nathan. He is the CEO and founder of Apollo 21. And we're going to explore the intersection of innovation, technology, and leadership, and discuss how his company, Apollo 21, is helping businesses unlock growth through technology-driven solutions and venture building. So we're going to find out what that means to you. Danny also shares some incredible insights on building and sustaining a culture of innovation, customer-centric problem solving, and the evolving nature of technology, whether it's in sports, whether it's in entertainment or rodeos. You're going to learn a lot about what they're doing for the rodeo industry, which is really quite fascinating. And if you've never been to a rodeo, you need to check one out. Anyway, this episode is packed with valuable lessons for anyone that's looking to lead with innovation and integrity. And you're going to learn a little bit more about what integrity means to Danny. So stay tuned for a deep dive into modern business transformation on the Branding Laboratory. Welcome, listeners, to another episode of the Branding Laboratory. I'm your host, Deevo. I'm glad to be here today. I am the Chief Experience Officer for the Brand Storyteller and the Fusion Creative Brands. Every week, I sit down with entrepreneurs and thought leaders who are pushing the boundaries of innovation and leadership. And today's episode is going to be particularly exciting as we dive into the world of AI-driven solutions, venture creation, and digital transformation with a leader who is sitting at the forefront of these technologies. And I'm really excited to dive into some of the really cool projects that he is working on. You can expect a candid conversation. So joining me today is Danny Nathan. He is the CEO and founder of Apollo 21. I like that name. Danny's work with Apollo 21 is helping businesses uncover hidden growth opportunities by combining technology with transformative venture building, which I'm really excited to learn what that venture building means. He's worked on startup to global companies. In fact, you were directly involved with Bank of America's AI tools at Erica. Is that what the name of it is?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, Erica. So Danny, welcome to the Branding Laboratory.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat.
So you've had a pretty cool journey so far, helping businesses become more agile and innovative. And I start off every podcast on how did you get here? What's your origin story? Where did this all begin? What was the inspiration behind founding Apollo 21? How did you find yourself at the intersection of technology and venture-driven? I'm really struggling with some words today. Words are hard for me. I've been on podcasts all morning, but venture-driven growth. There we go. We got it out.
Perfect. Yes, Apollo 21 is the culmination of 20 years worth of career. So I started way back in the day in advertising, realized pretty quickly that I wasn't enjoying that. Moved on to work in innovation consulting, helping companies ideate and launch new products and figure out how to take the transition into the world of the social web and the mobile web to heart and figure out how they were going to be present in that. That'll set the time frame for when I'm talking about as well. And then I've spent the last, 12, 15 years bouncing between founding startups and helping early stage startups get off the ground, find product market fit, et cetera. And so all of that came to a head about 3.5 years ago. I was serving as head of product for an LA startup focused on the video space. And to make a long story short, I had spent about the last year of my tenure there helping some of our other portfolio companies from our investors solve their technology problems. And eventually my founders and the folks at the family office that had invested in us tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, you seem to enjoy this. Why don't you go do this?" And so that led to the formation of Apollo 21. And here we are 3.5 years later.
You have been on both sides of the coin in terms of helping build businesses versus now launching your own. Do you have a preference between the two, something, or is it just different for every project?
It's a little different for every project. Ultimately, I do enjoy being in the seat that I'm in because it comes down to me. It's make or break it based on my
Mhm.
merits and the merits of the team that I can put together. And I have the ability to build that team and to run the company and build the culture as I see fit, which I really enjoy doing. That being said, the thing that really gets me going is just the problem solving in general. And that's part of what I really enjoy about working with early stage companies. And we do a lot of work with later stage or growth stage companies as well. And regardless, it's just a question of what problem are you trying to solve? How can we wrap our heads around that in a unique way? How can we layer innovation into the way that you're approaching that problem? And then how can we utilize technology to create some sort of solution that serves the business, the customers, et cetera?
Mm. You mentioned this term innovation, and it's an often used term by a lot of different people in a lot of different capacities. And so I'm always interested to learn what innovation means to you. But I want to go back a little bit. Have you always been at the forefront, even if you think of yourself as a kid? And I look at myself as a kid, I was always an entrepreneur. I just never knew that's what entrepreneurialism was. And in terms of like my friendships and the groups that I ran, like when I was in high school and even middle school, I was always starting these little clubs and building these little organizations. I was always doing something, right? And looking back, I never really realized at the time that actually meant something and would
Mm-hmm.
materialize into being a serial entrepreneur like I am today. But looking back, I'm like, fuck, man, the writing was on the wall at every corner. So do you
Yeah.
ever stop and reflect back to yourself in your younger years and be like, it all starts to make sense now. And that idea of creating and innovating and being more creative than the people around you and just always looking for ways to solve problems, that sort of stuff. Has that always been sort of part of your ethos?
It hasn't actually, interestingly enough. The creative side of things has always been a part of who I am. I from a very young age was involved in theater, and that was my kind of creative outlet for a very
Mm.
long time. And I was also really excited about outdoor sports. I did a lot of rock climbing and mountaineering. And to me, that was the representation of the problem solving side of my brain. And it actually wasn't until a couple of years into my career when I had my eyes open to the opportunities of entrepreneurship and what it took to start a business, what it meant to start a business, et cetera. And it really just lit a fire for me. And that's been the focus ever since. But it's really been the last, I don't know, 18 or so years. That's been my focus. And as a kid, it was a little bit more normal kid stuff.
All right, I guess I wasn't a normal kid then, so I guess I take that was a poor example. I was not in that space. Again, I never knew how to target it and identify it. It wasn't until I graduated college and I
Yeah.
went into the workforce, in the corporate workforce, and I realized, okay, this is not what I thought any of this was going to be. And I
This is
quick,
not what I signed up for.
yeah,
Wait a
like,
minute.
and I very quickly realized that I didn't have the autonomy. You talked about
Yeah.
building culture, and people use the word freedom a lot, but for me, it was more about having the opportunity to be creative, build a culture, build something for me, solve problems, and not have to have like bandwidth of papers and bureaucracy and just red tape that that I was just encumbering everything for me. That's my direction why I got into entrepreneurialism. In terms of in terms of your origin story, in terms of where you are today, when you look back at some of the different pieces and all the different pieces of the puzzle from startups to building companies to now running Apollo 21, is there one interlocking metric that you can say carried across in each of the different spheres?
Metric in terms of what is a KPI that has always been true, or metric in terms of just what is the kind of the personal truth behind it?
Both, actually.
Fair. I'm going to start with the second one.
I love how you clarified that, by the way. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. So the personal truth side of it, I find interesting. So I started my career as a designer, basically as a visual designer, and I have come to have this theory that building companies is or entrepreneurship is like the ultimate end state of design. And the way that I think about it is if you start off as a designer, often you start by pushing pixels and making something look pretty. And then a lot of people migrate from there into interaction design or user experience design. You start thinking, oh, okay, not only does it need to look good, but I need to understand how to do the thing that I want to do with it. And as you get more mature in that kind of setting, you start to think about the business needs that layer into the experience that you're trying to bring to a customer. And you go, oh, okay, I want this person to do this as they're trying to accomplish whatever it is that our tool does. But I also need to be mindful that we need to accomplish X, Y, and Z in order for this to be a symbiotic relationship. And ultimately, as you start thinking about the business needs, then you get into the idea of, oh, interesting. Not only am I designing a thing for somebody to look at, or a thing for somebody to use, or a thing that underpins a business, I'm also designing the business itself and thinking about what are the moving pieces? How do I architect the business to align to the progression of the product or the service that I'm creating and selling? And so for me, I guess the metric has always been the iteration of design thinking throughout my career and the learning of, huh, all right, I understand that part of design. What's the next part? And then the next part and the next part. And I'm not sure. Maybe there's another part that I haven't hit on yet, but this is where I am today. And then as far as a key metric that is a literal KPI, a metric that kind of is the tie that binds, for better or worse, and this is a non-answer because it's not actually a metric, but it's the customer. The thing that matters through all of it is the thing that is indicative of whether or not you are solving the problem for the customer in a way that supports your business.
Yeah.
And so there isn't really a single metric for that. You have to figure that out every time you get into it. But as long as you're putting that customer first and figuring out what the need is layered with the business goal, then ultimately my belief is that you're on the right track.
I love that you said that because it is different in every situation. And I've run a couple of different businesses, and even in my corporate life, there was always a different problem we were solving for a different customer that had a different type of need. But at the end of the day, the perception is reality.
Yes.
What the customer perceived about the deliverable solution that we were providing to them is all that really matters, whether it was a widget or a sock or whatever it might be. And I'm
Right.
always fascinated by that as that paradigm, that dynamic between customer satisfaction and operational efficiency and sustainability. And it's because you have to consider your team, you have to consider your business, you have to consider everything that you're building at the same time that you have to consider the customer, right?
Right.
Because ultimately you're not in if you have a service or a product or a platform or whatever it is, ultimately they're going to decide whether you're
Whether or not you
sustainable or not,
survive.
right?
Yeah.
Whether you survive, whether you're sustainable, whether you exist. But simultaneous to that, and they don't give a shit, which is always so funny to me. Like nobody cares about what we have to deal with as business
Mm-hmm.
owners. They just want to know that we're going to be able to deliver a product to them. And I've always found it really fascinating how CEOs approach that paradigm. Like maintaining sustainability within my operation, making sure that revenue works, making sure my people are happy, making sure that whatever it is that I'm doing in here is moving forward. But at the same time, I always have to put the customer front and center. Can you talk a little bit about that from your perspective and how you manage that paradigm?
It's interesting. What you're describing in many ways aligns to my thought process around innovation as well. And since we're here to talk about both, I'll go ahead and cram the two together here. A lot of companies out there start off as something that is innovative and disruptive, and they're out there to change the world, change the way that people do something, shake up an industry, blah, 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 blah. And ultimately, once those companies find success, effectively the momentum begins to slow down. The company gets bigger, the team that needs to support them starts to grow, and all of a sudden you hit that, whatever it is, 150 person point where all of a sudden the person that started the company looks around and goes, oh, I don't even know everybody's name anymore, or we don't even live in the same city anymore, whatever it is. And ultimately throughout that process, often what we'll see is that companies begin to optimize around efficiency, and they stop to think about the innovative mindset that got them to where they are at that point in time. And that's where sort of the death of innovation and ultimately the downfall of a lot of companies comes into play, because you start to rest on your laurels, you become the incumbent, you think, oh, we're too big to die at this point, and then somebody else who is in your shoes now, where you were, whatever it was, 5, 10 years ago, is suddenly looking at you going, oh, that's the guy that we've got to dethrone. Let's go figure out how to mess up their world. And somebody's always coming for you. And so we spend a lot of time talking with our clients and talking in general about what we refer to as a culture of innovation. And it's basically, how do you structure a company so that people within the organization understand the overarching strategic goal, but have the freedom to explore and to try things. And ultimately, what it comes down to is the freedom to fail without major repercussions in terms of, oh God, am I going to lose my job at my next performance review or whatever? Because those are the people that are exploring and doing weird things that are going to suddenly crack open new opportunities and make you go, oh my God, we never thought about that idea that way. How do we take that and run with it? And what would happen if we disrupted ourselves instead of waiting for somebody else to come and do it?
That's easy to say when you're a solopreneur because you are the culture of innovation. You are
Right.
everything rests on what you do or don't do. But you got into this space where you're now managing teams, you have employees and all that sort of stuff. So who is ultimately responsible for maintaining that culture of innovation and making sure that your team is all on the same page, brand alignment, brand messaging, vision, whatever the cool mantras you want to throw out there? Is it the CEO, or if you have a
Yeah.
team, whether it's human resources or you've got an operations manager, a COO, whatever it is it their responsibility to maintain their individual silos, or is it your responsibility as a CEO that ultimately must guide and become the North Star for that brand?
It's the latter. I think it always comes down to whoever's running the show. Assuming that's the CEO, yes, it is their responsibility to set the tone and to enable that type of thinking to happen within the organization. And that's really where culture comes to life. And then it also has to be supported by the C suite as a whole as well.
Mm.
If you've got a CEO that's yelling, be more innovative, try this, do weird things, and your COO or your CFO is walking around in the background tapping people on the shoulder going, don't do that, it's going to cost money, then
Mhm.
it's never going to work. And ultimately, what you're doing is ruining your own culture. So there has to be alignment there. But yes, it has to be born out of one person who has the vision and the wherewithal to champion that kind of mentality, and then to ensure that they're surrounding themselves with other people that have similar beliefs and that will help them ingrain that culture in every new person that comes in the door.
I love your take on that. We're fully in alignment on that. I was having this debate with somebody the other day who felt like it was the opposite of that. That as a CEO,
Interesting.
it's your job. Yeah, true story. That as a CEO, this is a position that you've earned. And as such, your team is beholden to whatever your vision is, and it's their job to get on board with that. And that it's not their responsibility to manage the individuals that are working for them, whether it's a C-suite or the factory line worker. Their job is to guide the company into the future, whatever that means. And I was like, that's really nebulous. What exactly does that mean? If you're guiding the future, but you're not managing your team, and they're not in alignment with you, then you're not managing the company. You're not guiding them towards the future. It led me to think about this idea between there are multiple types of CEOs, right?
Yeah.
But there's two opposing thoughts on this that I've come to the conclusion of having worked for different types of CEOs. There's the ones that feel that way, that are entitled to their position. And then there's the ones that are more people managers that are really involved in developing their employees and developing their staff. Because for me, having seen both of those types of CEOs and now trying to model my own behavior as a CEO that has a team, it feels to me like what you described and your answer is the right way to do that. And I don't know if there's a right or wrong, but there probably is. Ultimately, as a CEO, it's your job to build the people that are supporting the brand and the vision. And if they're out of alignment, then you have a whole bunch of things that are just going in a bunch of didactic ways that is probably not conducive to running a successful business, right?
Yeah, I think what you're driving at is the dichotomy between the visionary CEO and the operational CEO.
Mm.
And the visionary CEO is the one that's going to charge ahead into the future and probably, and I'm speaking in gross generalizations here, but may not be as involved or want to be as involved in sort of the one-to-one management of the team, but rather is going to look around and go, no, we're going this way, and everybody's got to get on board. And if you're not on board with the vision, then go away, whatever. And the contrast to that is the operational CEO is going, okay, we need to manage the team. We need to make sure that everybody is free to do their best work, or again, whatever euphemism you want to throw at that. And to your point, neither one is wrong, but they're definitely different styles. And I think that a lot of it comes down to where you are in your company's life cycle and what you want from the company looking into the future. And
Mm.
so thinking about the operational CEO, I think stereotypically we would say is better at keeping the train on the tracks and running smoothly and moving in the direction that it has always moved because it is on tracks. Whereas the visionary CEO is your, I don't know, if I'm going to take the crappy metaphor, it's the airplane to your train and going, nope, we're going to go wherever the heck we want. And
Mm.
you're all along for the ride.
Eloquently stated. In terms of, I love what you said in the beginning of this conversation around freedom to explore, or really freedom to fail, and in terms of guiding your people so that they have the opportunity to do that. As it pertains to yourself, though, do you practice what you preach? Are you one of those types of individuals that holds themselves to a inexplicable standard in terms of not ever being able to achieve that and looking back and beating yourself up because you didn't allow yourself to fail, or are you practicing what you're preaching?
Oh, I live by a personal mantra that is fail beautifully. I
Mm,
am 100% on board with the idea that failure is a fact of life, and there's no way that you're going to move through life without encountering failure, whether that's business or personal or whatever it is. And so rather than trying to fight the idea of failure, I've simply learned to embrace the notion that when I fail, it is generally a learning experience and an opportunity for me to move forward with greater knowledge. The only point of kind of inexcusable failure, in my opinion, is a lack of trying. If you're
mm,
not even going to bother to put yourself out there, then that's a failure that you're not going to overcome. It's a character flaw, if you will,
mm.
versus enabling yourself to get out and try things and figure out what works and what doesn't without beating yourself up over it. And we fail, look, we fail all the time. And every company goes through periods of struggle and then periods of success and so on and so forth. And I think in a lot of ways it's cyclical. You set a goal for yourself, you try and reach that goal, you probably fail multiple times along the way until eventually you have that sort of light shining moment where you go, oh, and you go, oh my God, we should do this. And then all of a sudden you hopefully find yourself in a cycle of success until the next challenge comes up and then you go and fail again. And look, some failures are big and they're painful and they're really hard to get over. And some failures are, I forgot my lunch today. I guess I'll have to order something, whatever. But
I'm really enjoying this conversation. We're talking with Danny Nathan. He's the CEO of Apollo 21. And I tell my children to that point, because failure is in every opportunity, it's an opportunity to learn something.
yeah,
But one of the things that I also try to instill in them is that if you continue making the same mistake over and over, there's something in
right.
your process that isn't working. So you can be stubborn all you want, but if you're not getting the results that you want, you need to take a look at what it is that you're doing and be able to learn from that and adapt from that, not just saying, oh, Dad, you told me to fail. It's okay. But it is okay to fail. But if you keep making the same effing mistake over and
Right.
over, you need to stop back and take a step back and say, okay, why does this keep happening to me?
Failure without learning
Yeah.
is a flaw. But
Yeah.
failure is an opportunity to learn, and then taking advantage of that opportunity, I think, is perfectly fine and is the way that the world works. It's the way that we do
Yeah.
things.
Do looking back at your career and the trajectory, were there some marquee moments where you had these failed opportunities that enabled you to be pivot, make an adjustment, and learn from that opportunity, and something bigger and better came out of it that you hadn't even anticipated?
Absolutely. As I mentioned earlier, I started my career in advertising, which in and of itself ended up being a massive failure, in large part because I spent 2 years getting a graduate degree and then realized immediately that I didn't want to do it, which was a failure in its own right. But more interestingly was the moment when I realized that I just couldn't hack it in advertising anymore. And it was in a very specific meeting at my last job at an ad agency. And I remember walking out of that meeting and just going, okay, I'm done. There's no way I cannot keep doing this every single day for years or decades. And it was that moment that kind of became a trigger for change for me. And I remember I left the building that day. I went and bought a stack of books about as tall as I was that I refer to as my second master's degree. It was a self-taught moment of, okay, I've learned a bunch of stuff, but I've realized that in practice I don't believe in it. So I'm going to go out and find all of the books and the learning material that I can to teach me how to do things in a way that align to what I think is correct. And this was at a time when the way that people use technology was very much in flux. This was early 2000s, pre smartphone and pre social media and all of that stuff, and right on the cusp. And I kept looking around going, wait, the world is changing. We have access to information and technology that changes the way that we can think about and do things and interact with one another and with brands and so on and so forth. And so I went out and just taught myself how I thought about approaching all of that. And then that became the onus for my job search, basically. And as I said, I took it upon myself to get out of the world of advertising. And that was the lens that I went and talked to people through. It was, okay, I see the world in this way. And if you don't see the world that way, that's fine. You're allowed to have your own perspective, but I know that I'm not going to succeed here. And so it gave me a really solid litmus test for understanding what I wanted out of my next job. And ultimately, I ended up in a place that fulfilled that need for me in just an utterly amazing fashion. And I spent 5 years at an innovation consultancy that was just ripe with opportunity and had chances to do things and interact with people and meet people that I would never have otherwise been put in front of. I flown to the UK and sat at a table across from James Dyson
Oh,
to
wow.
talk about how to launch his latest product for him. And it was just amazing experiences like that that helped shape my view of everything moving forward. And then, of course, ultimately there was failure in that experience as well. I probably stayed there a year or maybe two longer than I should have because I thought I had more to learn. And eventually I realized that it was time to go. And that led to my starting my first company. And so at every step, there's always a failure moment that for me triggers whatever the next big thing is for me.
It's a ballsy and courageous move to be able to just walk away from something and be able to have the wherewithal to understand that it's not working for you and just recognize that. Because if you take a look at a lot of people, and I have a lot of friends that are in this space that are stuck in a job. I was just having a conversation in the airport a couple of days ago with this somebody who I met on the plane. Wonderful conversation, makes a lot of money doing something in the banking industry, but hates his life. I hate my life. And I was like, why don't you do something? Do you ever have any dreams, any aspirations? He's, man, I have so many aspirations I filled 10 journals with. And I was like, are you doing anything about those? And he's like, how can I? I have a family, I've got kids,
Right.
I have a job. And so people get caught on this treadmill and they get into a point of where they think there's no return and they're just like, fuck it, I'm just going to ride this out for the rest of my time. And
Yeah.
it's unfortunate because there's a lot of things that don't that aren't brought to the universe because of somebody's great idea, but lack of courage to step into that space because whether they're comfortable or they're scared or whatever it is, a lot of respect for you being able to do that. It's not a capability that everyone possesses.
No,
And
but to be fair, I was also pretty young and didn't have a family or anything like that to worry about. And I was very much at a point where I was trying to figure out who I was before I had gotten to the point of family and all of that fun stuff. And so I was, in many ways, I was fortunate enough to have the realization early enough that I could do something about it without feeling like I was stuck.
sure. Fair enough. I can agree with that. You've worked on some pretty impressive projects in your career, including Bank of America's chatbot, Erica. Can you share sort of some pivotal moments around the creation of that, your involvement with that? How are you helping business drive transformation with this? What was your role in that whole episode?
Yeah, the Bank of America project, I'm happy to share a bit about. I'll be frank, it's not perhaps necessarily the most indicative of the type of thinking that we tend to champion, but we were fortunate. We were called in to help with the kind of re-envisioning of what Erica could be. And so this was 2.5 years ago, right at the forefront of all things AI becoming part of the everyday vernacular. And kudos to the Bank of America team. They were aware enough to recognize that the current iteration of the Erica chatbot, which at the time was just a Q&A bot that was pre-programmed and it was very easy to fall outside of the lines where it could answer the questions. And they wanted to think about what the opportunities were, how it would come to life, and what type of access to customer data it might need in order to provide value for customers. And we were brought in to help think about largely what this sort of user experience of that was and where people might want Erica to pop up in their interactions with Bank of America. Should Erica, for example, be able to start a conversation, or is Erica only on call? Do you want Erica to be able to send you a push notification that says, hey, balance alert, or congratulations, your paycheck just landed, or whatever it was? Or is Erica only there when I summon her? And so it was a really exciting time to think about what the interactions with a data-driven AI platform might look like from the customer perspective, especially at a time when people weren't quite as comfortable as they are today with the idea of AI, the idea that something might be watching out over my data. And when you're talking about financial data in particular, people get a little
Yeah.
prickly about it for obvious reasons. And so there was a lot of kind of fine line to navigate there around how much is too much, what can we do in the future once people get comfortable with it, what should it be today, how do we get to the point where Erica goes from canned responses to generated responses that feel conversational and things like that. So it was a lot of fun to be involved with.
You said it wasn't the most indicative of the top type of things that you champion as a company. What are some of the factors that you champion as innovative and transformative?
So a lot of the work that we do, again, is grounded in this idea of building or helping companies build a culture of innovation and then helping them bring something to life through that lens so that they can not only understand what a culture of innovation means and looks like, but they can also then see what the output of that effort is. And we're split probably 60-40 actually between work that is focused on internal operations, so building technology for use inside the house versus building technology for customer use. And both challenges offer a lot of interesting opportunity. I'll give one example. We had a client in the Western sports space of all things. So think cowboys and rodeo and all of that fun stuff. And originally they came to us as a relatively new company and basically said, hey, we believe that this space is ripe for disruption, that technology can help play a huge role in that. And to that end, we started this company by buying 5 others, and we now have a whole stack of data, but it's all spread in a bunch of files on somebody's computer, and we don't know what to do with it. We can't do anything with it. And what started as basically a 6-week engagement just to help them make sense of the data that they had at their disposal grew into about a 1.5 year engagement that saw us building everything from their data management platform to their marketing operations technology to literally an internal platform for the management of 600 to 700 rodeo events a year. And then we then turned our attention to more of the consumer space and ended up building what was effectively like ESPN for the world of rodeo. And at every step, all of it was data driven, led by customer development processes, and really grounded in the fact that we had a unique opportunity to talk to fans in the space and athletes in the space to understand exactly what each of them were lacking in the idea of rodeo fandom to date so that we could help bring that to life for them. And one of the really interesting insights that came to bear there was, unlike a lot of other sports, rodeo has a very blurry line between who is a fan and who is a participant, because the amateur kind of rodeo events are very much a stepping stone into the world of professional rodeo. And the way that you become a rodeo professional is literally by coming up through the ranks. And so what you find is that the folks that are sitting in the stands as fans at some of the really big rodeos around the country or around the world are also the next weekend going out and competing themselves. And so there's this really weird blurry line between, are you a fan or are you an athlete, or maybe you're both, and that's amazing. And so we built all of the technology, and in particular the rodeo application, with that kind of truth in mind so that people could feel like they were living in both worlds.
This truth you speak of, where there are people living in both worlds, is this something that this company was aware of, or is this something that you had uncovered in looking at the data?
No, this was very much something that we uncovered in the customer development process when we started with the expectation that we were actually going to build 2 applications for them, one for fans and one for athletes. And it was on our recommendation, after going through the customer development process and interviewing a bunch of both fans and athletes, that they combined them into a single experience so that we could take advantage of that discovery.
Hmm. When you're working with corporations or businesses and organizations, and there's a lot of moving parts like this, like you just described, and there's a lot of people and a lot of context and a lot of history and a lot of learned behaviors, good or bad, there's a lot of unpredictability with innovation and transformation.
Yeah.
How do you manage fear of change with these types of situations?
Fear of change is always one of those things that's a little bit tough to navigate, especially when you're dealing with larger companies and dealing with companies that have a lot of folks that are potentially concerned about what the impacts of your work might be on their career and their personal life. Because as we know, the idea of we're going to build AI to take the jobs of n number of people, for example, we still need to be aware that there are n number of people sitting around who are getting paid by that company to do the thing. And so we try to maintain an awareness around what the ramifications of that development are, but we also need to help those companies understand that if things were going really well, they probably wouldn't be calling us in the first place. They wouldn't be thinking about how to solve unique problems because they wouldn't have them if everything was hunky dory. And so there's very much a kind of dichotomy there around how do we protect the people and make sure that they're comfortable with the idea of what we're building? But at the same time, how do we create enough change within the organization that it enables forward growth and forward momentum that perhaps they're not seeing today? And so we do a lot of work to help educate executives in the space and help them understand what some of the fallout might be from the decisions that are being made. And then we also do a lot of work talking with the folks that are in the building who are going to be using whatever the thing is that we're going to create so that we can understand what their needs are exactly, and then understand also what part of their job we can help to make easier, for example, that doesn't put the job in jeopardy, but rather makes them 10x at that job so that they can outperform, what they're used to.
I love that you said that because in my experience, and I don't have as transformative experiences perhaps as what you're doing, but in my world, especially when I'm working with small businesses, there's always somebody or someone or a small group of people who are not on board with the changes, who are
Yeah.
not on board with the adaptations, whether it's rebranding, whether it's marketing, whether it's content creation, whether whatever it is. And so there's always somebody that's causing some sort of disruption to the antithesis of what we're trying to do. And what you said really resonated with me. You said education and meeting people where they are
Yeah.
and then letting them see the causation behind what you're doing as opposed to just like jamming it down their throat. You're just going to do this. We said so. So it's
Right.
really, that's a really important point to notice. Like whatever industry you're operating in, it's really important to, we talked about this at the outset, perception is reality. So if somebody you're working with is thinking that my job security is at stake here, I'm going to become obsolete. Maybe I'm not going to be as important as it was. Maybe I'm not going to have that juicy title that I had, whatever it is, right? Because there's always
Right.
going to be, with transformation, there's always going to be adjustments. But if you can target that stuff early on and systemically approach that by meeting them where they are, it's a much better optimal approach than just trying to jam it down their throat.
Oh yeah, jamming something down somebody's throat is a surefire way to make them not want whatever it is because you're not giving them a choice in the matter. And a lot of the a lot of the work that we do, a lot of the exercises that we go through, the workshops that we run, the learnings that we set out to take from our clients so that we can help them move forward involve people at all ranks of the organization as opposed to just the executive suite, for example. And we do it for exactly that reason, so that everybody feels like they've had a chance to be heard, and so that the insights that can be born from people who are on the front line of that organization that executives may not even be aware of have a chance to be surfaced so that those people feel like rather than coming in and cramming something down their throats, they have had a chance to input on and really help direct whatever that innovation effort is or whatever that new product is, et cetera, so that they feel bought in. And a lot of people, just by giving them an opportunity to be heard, can be brought on board and shifted in mindset from, oh God, you're coming to steal my job or make me obsolete, to, oh wow, you're really doing something interesting that hopefully is going to make my job easier or that's here to benefit the company as a whole or whatever the case may be.
In terms of Apollo 21, I'd like to talk a little bit about that business for a minute. You're helping companies scale through these tech-driven solutions. Can you talk a little bit about the company and if you had to distill it down into just a small elevator pitch, what does Apollo 21 do? What problem do they solve ultimately for companies?
So Apollo 21 is a weird combination of an innovation consultancy and a product design studio. And what I mean by that is we help companies strategically view what the opportunities are for innovation and help them understand why companies that commit to innovation as a practice, to building a culture around innovation, outperform those who do not. And there is very much data that backs it up. I'll give you a couple of examples. We have data that shows that companies that focus on building a culture of innovation generally see as much as a 22% greater performance in their financials and as much as a 900% greater increase in their stock price over time as compared to companies that are focused on reactive problem solving in the moment versus taking a point of looking for what's coming next. And so we very much believe in that. And then combined with the ideals of what it takes to design a great product or a service and the capabilities to actually bring that to life, that becomes one of the key differentiators for us. A lot of folks hire a consultant or a consultancy and they expect that person's going to come in. Hopefully, they're going to have some really great ideas or unique insights. But ultimately, what they're going to get is a presentation or a paper or whatever that says, you should dot, and gives a whole stack of changes that should be made. But then that person leaves and the company's left with, we should, but how do we and why? What's the output? And what are some of the things that we should look out for as we do the things that we should? And we pride ourselves very much on not just handing over a you should document and walking away, but rather helping plan for the future and helping to execute those plans in a manner that aligns to those companies' needs. And in doing so, we go so far as to operate under the expectation that our clients will eventually outgrow us if we do our jobs. So if we help a company create something innovative, build a new product, and ground that product in technology, eventually they're going to look at us and say, hey, this is great. It's changed a bunch for us. It's time for us to bring it in-house. And we have learned by mistake that rather than fighting that, we're better off just embracing it from the outset and working with our clients to understand what the future might look like in success and how to plan for that eventuality so that nobody is caught off guard at that moment when they eventually look at us and go, hey, can you help us hire a VP of engineering, or can you help us build our engineering team so that we can take this away from you? And our answer is yes, absolutely. In fact, we will start from day one with that in mind.
So a lot of this projection that you're doing in these build outs and these scale ups and these innovations and these transformations, are they based upon AI data that is future state, or can you walk us through some of the process and on how you're coming up with innovative ideas to lead a company into a different stratosphere or a different area or a different industry or a different product, whatever it is, but you still have the security of understanding what that impact might be?
It is less grounded in a huge pool of AI data, although that is becoming more of a possibility and more of a reality in terms of how we can utilize data to better inform what that future state might look like. A lot of what we're focused on today is simpler than that. A lot of companies that are struggling around the ideals of innovation, the ideas of longevity, and what the future might look like for them are struggling based on very simple problems. It could be operational problems, it could be slowdowns in sales or misalignment with customer needs over time. It could be an inability to keep up with the potential that technology brings to the table for them. Could be all sorts of things. And so we start very simply by figuring out what the biggest pain points are, helping that company prioritize what pain points will have the biggest impact on their business and what will align most thoroughly to their customer needs, and then helping them bring that to life. And the future state vision is really based on, okay, you've stated that you have these 5, 7, whatever problems. We've helped you prioritize down to the top 1 to 3. Let's think for a moment about what the world looks like if solution number 1 is a success. Are you going to need more people? Is it going to change the dynamics of your customer service team? Are you going to need people with skill sets that you don't currently have in-house, like a software team, for example? And we just start asking the right questions at the right time to begin to uncover that, so that rather than getting to a point 6, 8, 12 months down the road where they look at us and unexpectedly say, oh, wow, I think we might want to hire an engineering team. We just start talking to them about that from day one and go, hey, you're hiring us because you don't have the capability to do this in-house. Let's talk about what happens when you get to the point where you want to do this in-house. And let's talk about how we're going to formulate the team that's going to build this today with that in mind, so that nobody's caught off guard, so that there's no misalignment of expectations that you're going to spend X dollars with us to create something new and then be surprised by what it takes to keep that thing alive and growing over time, for example.
Is this a process that you have refined over time? Did you always, let me back up, in this innovative approach to things and being able to almost predict the future, so to speak, you're looking at specific variables. And I say that sort of tongue in cheek, but you've learned to look at variables in a business
Yes.
operationally, and you can see the writing on the wall because every business has a
Mhm.
forecasted trend, right? And so you're taking all of those experiences and all those different contexts and all your different experiences with these different types of businesses, and you're using that to help formulate the next decision and the next decision and the next decision. Is that kind of the process?
Yeah, basically, it's, I guess to put it
I'm
very
dumbing it
simply,
down. Sorry, I don't mean to make it sound so like inferior. I
no, no,
know that
no.
it's
Yeah,
not, but
no, you're hitting the nail on the head. What I started to say was, rather than thinking about it from the perspective of artificial intelligence to help figure out what that future state looks like, we rely on real intelligence. We rely
yeah.
on the experience of the people who have done it over and over on our team. And look, When somebody brings us in, I'll go back to our rodeo client as an example. Our team didn't have expertise in the rodeo space. In fact, most of us were not exactly rodeo fanatics heading into that project. And so there's an interesting balance and a ton of collaboration that goes into a world where we can learn about rodeo and the needs of fans and athletes in the rodeo space quickly enough to be dangerous and to help, as you pointed out, predict what that future might look like alongside of our clients. But it doesn't happen in a vacuum. We don't go lock ourselves in a room and go, all right, we're going to plug ourselves into the matrix and download rodeo. It happens because we work intensely closely with our clients to understand the thing that they are the expert in so that we can then layer in the thing that we are the experts in around, okay, if this is the way that it acts today, how do we want that to come to fruition in the future? What role does technology play? What happens when we already know that in this world, every one of those fans is walking around with a supercomputer in their pocket? And what does that mean for the way that they interact with rodeo? And so it's very much this collaborative combination of sucking the expertise out of our clients and then layering in our own experience and future vision around what we can do to help them become what they want to be in the future.
Expertise vampires. I like that. In,
Yes, I might have to steal that. That's great.
in terms of communicating complex solutions, this is something that I encounter a lot of times, especially with people who have never done a lot of marketing, who don't have a lot of experience with brand messaging, who don't have a social media presence. Their website is completely out of date. It hasn't been updated since 1998 type of thing. And a lot of times I'm going into these conversations with them and I'm communicating. I catch myself that I'm communicating complex solutions
Yeah.
that need to be dumbed down so that they are, again, meeting people where they are, that are more accessible and compelling. I'm suspecting, again, I don't know the type of people you work with, but given the nature of what you do, I imagine there are situations and scenarios like that pop up frequently where you have to reorient yourself and take the information how you would normally dispense it and break it down into simplified, uncomplex terms. Is that something that you encounter often? And if so, what's the approach you take with that?
We deal with that all the time. And a lot of that, I've personally grown a knack for doing what you're describing throughout my career and figuring out how to take the words that are coming out of my engineering team's mouths and re-articulating them in a way that somebody who does rodeo for a living or whatever can understand. And part of that comes down to our kind of overarching approach. We always take a crawl, walk, run approach to our projects. And explaining to somebody the idea of, okay, first we're going to crawl, then we're going to walk, then we're going to run is also very much the way that I find we articulate those types of ideas. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is make it so that people can achieve blank. What is the thing that we want a rodeo fan to get out of using the application? And when we're talking to our engineers, we might say, hey, we want to hook up a live stream and have an H.264 file that's downloaded in whatever packets at a time, blah, blah, blah. And they're going to go, okay, cool, I got it. But if you say that to your client, they're going, what? You know, we're going to make it so that your fans can watch rodeos on their phone. Oh, cool. Okay, great. And so it's really, as you've pointed out a couple of times, it's meeting people where they are. It is learning the vernacular and figuring out where their education level falls in terms of understanding what you're going to be talking about, and then helping to articulate it in ways that make sense to them. And look, if ultimately, if we can't achieve that, then the rest of what we do fails. Because if you can't help somebody understand what you want them to build or what there is opportunity to build or how you want to go about it, then they're never going to sign off on building it. And so becoming the interpretation layer between the world of technology and the world of that particular business is deeply ingrained in all of our projects
It's
because it has to be.
Yeah, I would imagine. Do you worry that technology will ever supersede the experiential aspect of, you have rodeos on phones and you have social media experiences and you have meta virtual and all these different things that are popping up where it's taking out the human experience in the sense of like us flesh to flesh enjoying something, sitting in a rodeo show. I was at NASCAR as a client of mine, and so I was at the race this weekend, and I was blown away by how many people were not actually watching the race, but were watching the race on their phone in the grandstand, and they were sitting in the tarmac or they were out by the concession
That's
stand.
fascinating.
Yeah, and I was blown away. I was like, the NASCAR is very culture centers around making it experiential. That
Yeah,
is what they are. You can go out of the pits, you can stand next to the cars. I was literally standing next to Michael Jordan, 2 feet from Michael Jordan on Sunday. Like this, the
nice.
crazy, yeah, like the craziest thing. And but at the same time, there was all that. We went up into the grandstand just to have that bird's eye view. And I was
Yeah.
looking around, and aside from the innumerable number of people that didn't have their shirts on, there was a lot of people that were watching their phones and engaging in this virtual experience. And I just remember thinking, and they weren't watching anything else. I would look into their phone, looking down, and they were literally
Yeah.
watching the race. And because NASCAR has this portal where you can interact and hear the radio announcers and all these
That's
different
the
things.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the thing right there. It is very much it's very much an interesting kind of experiential moment where you go to a thing, a NASCAR race, to watch the thing, but we have grown accustomed to the idea that there is more of the story available to us around that event and that experience than what we can immediately take
Mhm.
in face to face. And I think that people are growing accustomed to the moment of, oh yeah, I want to see it and I want to be there and I want to hear the screaming and the engines and whatever, but I also want the experience of the story that gets told through the greater access to, I don't know, in sports we talk a lot about how data drives the storytelling and the experience, because if you think about sports and how people interpret it and understand the trajectory and the arc of a player's career or a driver's career or a team's progression or whatever, it's told through the data. How many wins,
Mhm.
how many losses,
Mhm.
how many three-pointers led to this win, whatever it was. And so there's that inseparable moment of data-driven storytelling that I think people are now accustomed to wanting to suck up in that experience. And I guess we've just gotten to a point where we're okay with it standing in front of some of the human interaction that also makes life amazing and that we want. But at the same time, it's part of what makes people feel engrossed and connected in that sport.
Yeah, it's a wonderful conversation to have, and it's worth exploration. And someone like you certainly has some really cool insights on it. I've often wondered, have we gone past the point of no return? Because I turned on the TV a couple of nights ago, and I don't watch sports very often, but there was an NFL game going on, and I was blown away first and foremost that you can change from the game itself to like different camera views of the
Mm-hmm.
game, right? Then you can switch it to a broader expansion where you can have like multiple games going on at the same time. And then if you zoom into a game, there's literally like a running, I can't even describe it because I don't watch sports very often, but I was blown away by the amount of statistics and
Yes.
background information that was lambasting all over the screen at
Yeah.
various points of the game. And I'm just like, my head was like on a swivel trying to
Yeah.
take it all in. And I hadn't watched a game. This was an NFL game, by the way, and I haven't watched an NFL game in maybe 5 years. And the evolution between 5 years ago and today, dude, it's like a complete metamorphosis. And so
Yes.
it made me start to think, have we superseded the humanity of sports and like sitting with our popcorn and getting our beer and are just sitting in the stands and enjoying the game? And well, I got what happened to my camera? Have we gone past that point of no return? And I'm going to let you answer that while I fix my camera.
Sure. I think in many ways we have. And I think it is an evolution of how people want to consume sport through that kind of statistical, data driven understanding of what the thing is that they love. And I think we've just reached a point where, yes, people are willing to give up the inherent sort of sit back experience of drink a beer, eat popcorn, watch a game in favor of the leaned in experience of, oh, this is happening. How do I understand what the relevance of that is I'm watching? And people are so now connected to multiple teams and multiple outcomes of what's going on that it's almost inherent in just trying to keep up with the sport itself, like sports in general. And let me be clear, I'm not a big sports fan either. I just happen to have worked in the space enough to have seen the value of kind of those experiences and what data does, especially for people who really are deeply driven fans of a given sport. And yeah, I think that we've hit the point of trade off where people want the leaned in experience of sucking in all of the information and understanding it halftime of whatever game you're watching, that because this team is ahead by 3 and this other game that's happening over here, that team's behind, that now this team's going to overtake that team. And I don't know, I'm going to butcher this because I'm not a sports guy in spite of whatever I'm rattling off here. But whatever the league rankings are at the moment, like that's going to change based on the
Sure.
output of what's happening right now. And I think people want to keep up with that in the moment in ways that we just couldn't even imagine in the past. Think about it. Like it used to be you had to get to the newspaper the next day to find
Yeah.
out what the results were. And now people are going, no, I don't need that. I got this right here.
Yeah, it's absolutely just mind-boggling how quickly the pace has moved. I want to shift gears for the last part of our call, and I know we don't have a lot of time, but I'm fascinated by CEOs and business leaders' concept of leadership. It's something that's just always intrigued me, and no matter who you talk to, no two people have the same philosophy on how to handle controversy or how to handle conflict or how to handle success and all those different things. When you look at yourself as a leader, an innovator, a transformative CEO, and you had to cherry pick a few elements of what makes you a leader and what makes a good leader, where do you fall in that, and how does that materialize for you?
I think the simplest way to state that is put people first. So I'll give an example. We run a completely remote team. We operate in what's called a ROW, results-oriented work environment. So we don't have standard work hours. As long as you're making it to the meetings that I need you in and articulating when you can't make it so that we can either plan accordingly or execute without you, I don't care when your work gets done. I don't care where it gets done. I don't care if you're in an office or on a beach or whatever. And more importantly, we've built a team and a culture around that mentality. And the outcome of that is people learn to support one another and people learn to help one another have the moments that make us human. And whether that's it's my kid's birthday, I'm going to be out for the afternoon, or God forbid, I got to run a kid to the doctor or a pet to the vet or whatever it is, understanding the realities that when push comes to shove, these are the things that are important to people and in life, not whether or not this pixel on the website gets pushed at this exact moment, or when push comes to shove, whether or not that website is live now or tomorrow. And I say that carefully because obviously we try to respect our clients' deadlines for things like website launches or whatever it is. But at the same time, there is a human element around leadership. And I think the more that you can treat people like humans and acknowledge the fact that they have lives outside of whatever it is you're doing with them, regardless of how passionate they are about it. Because the flip side of that is we hire people who love what they do and who love the work that we're doing. And it's awesome because they are then personally committed to it and having fun executing on it. And that's a perfect balance because if somebody is invested in and enjoying the work that they are doing for you, for your clients, etc., then you also know that when they say, I need tomorrow afternoon off, it's my kid's birthday party or whatever, that there is a level of importance to that moment for them that warrants respect. And I think it creates a really nice kind of symbiotic environment where people understand what one another value and aim to help those people achieve those things.
Yeah, I like the answer. There's a lot of empathy and compassion in what you just said, and goes back to what we talked about multiple times is meeting people where they are and understanding their needs and how can I serve those needs, but at the same time not compromise the operations of what I'm trying to build here.
Right.
In terms of you and the fragility of who you are as a leader, and I'm going somewhere with this, do you ever have doubt around the things that you're doing, or do you ever have fears? Do you look at some of the challenges that you're facing? And if so, you're human. I can't imagine that you're not. And these are internal
Every
conversations. Yes,
single
exactly.
day.
So as someone who has seen a lot of different things and had a lot of success and doing different things and working with different types of people, how do you manage these challenges? How do you manage these fears, these self-doubts? Do you have some sort of tips and hacks that you could share in your journey?
Honestly, it all comes down to we're all just figuring it out as we go. And I hit moments all the time where I go, oh God, was that the right decision? Or I don't know what decision to make. And there are moments in that process where I lean on the people around me and I bring in particularly the senior leadership on my team who I trust deeply and have worked with for years, even prior to Apollo 21. So we've built a lot of trust amongst ourselves with one another to help figure out what's going on. And then there's moments that, to be frank, I don't bring to the team because I don't want them to be concerned. I don't want something to weigh on their mind that might, distract them unnecessarily. And a lot of it is just figuring out when the right time is to talk to somebody else about that issue and figure out who the someone else is that we should be talking to so that you can figure out a path through all of it. And a lot of it comes down to exactly what I've been talking about, treating people like they're human, helping them understand that you too are human, and dealing with the things that come up in that process at every step of the way.
In terms of a couple closing questions, in terms of the message or the perspective that you would want people to have about you and your business, and you're in a crowded room and you just finished delivering a lesson or a keynote or a workshop or whatever it is, or if you could take all of the people that you've ever had an experience with and put them all in one room and then you were no longer there for a minute, is there a central message that you'd want them to have about who you are, Danny Nathan?
Uh, I am firmly of the belief that when we're dealing with business and with people and with all of the things that we've been talking about, dealing with integrity is one of the most important aspects of this. Building a level of trust and understanding around having somebody's best interests at heart. And I personally try to bring that to everything that we do at Apollo 21, regardless of whether that is internal facing towards my team or external towards a client. And I've had moments where that was questioned. And I think that more than anything else that I've run into in running Apollo 21, some of the most painful moments are when that comes into question because it means that, frankly, it means that
Your
ultimately
integrity.
I have failed.
You mean
Yes, when my
uh-huh.
integrity comes into question,
Mhm.
it means that I have failed because it means that at some point along the way, I didn't instill enough trust and confidence in myself and my team so that somebody understood that when something went wrong, when something took longer to get through development than we expected, when we've been saying for 2 or 3 weeks we're almost done and it's still dragging on, those are the moments when that level of trust and integrity come into play because they are the defining moments between whether somebody looks at you and says, I believe that you have our best interest at heart. I believe that you understand what's going on. And I trust that when you say you're still working on it, you're still working on it for the betterment of our business and our relationship. To me, that's the one thing that I would hope that room full of people would believe in common about me and about working with Apollo 21.
That's interesting that you say it that way. I wouldn't have thought integrity would have been come into question if you didn't deliver on a project the right way, unless there was something that you said you were going to do and you didn't do. I guess when you were telling that story, I was thinking more along the lines of proficiency and qualitative and all those sorts of stuff. But I like the perspective. It's interesting to consider the word integrity itself and what.
A lot of what we do often is trying to build something that hasn't been built before.
Mhm.
And we do our best to figure out how long we think it's going to take, or how many people, or how much money, or whatever, but we're not always right.
Mhm.
And our being wrong is not malicious. It's one thing I can say with confidence. It is never a malicious mistake to try and
Sure.
wring more money out of a client or something like that. And so that's why integrity comes to mind in that process, because it's me trying to instill the belief that we are doing everything that we can to create success for the people around us.
I really love that, and I like how you said it because it repositioned my paradigm around it. You mentioned you getting your second master's degree. These books behind me are my first master's degree. I had an experience with a marketing company. It's why I'm doing what I'm doing today, where they didn't have integrity, where I spent a lot of money on something that gave me very little results, and I just remember thinking through the process early on, I started seeing the lack of customization, the lack of tailoring, the lack of meeting where I am, the lack of breaking things down for me and making simplified complex concepts simple for me to understand and things of this nature. And I just remember thinking there's got to be a better way to do this, manage a client's expectations, but still deliver quality and at the same time have sustainability, but actually add some value. And everything I've heard you say so far, and thank you, is add value. What problem do you solve? Can you be innovative? How can you be transformative? How can you meet the client where they are and fix something for them? Because in the end, that's all that really matters. And I went back to school so that I could figure out how can I deliver a result that I wanted to see in my company that they came so far off that I was like, this has just been a total waste of 8 months. And this has been a really cool conversation, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us on the Branding Laboratories. Any closing thoughts? Anything you'd like to add? Where can people find you? What's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, all that fun stuff. Best way to find us is on our website, apollo21.io. We also have what I personally think is an awesome newsletter, but that might be because I write it every week, that is called Innovate, Disrupt, or Die. And you can find that at innovatedisruptordie.com. And then, of course, we're on all of the requisite socials and all of that fun stuff. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So come find me, come say hello. If you happen to be in New York, I run a monthly founders dinner, and we actually meet in person and talk face to face. Technology hasn't broken everything yet.
I love that. There's not an app if I go to a founders dinner that the people are going to be on their phone while you're up there doing the engagement.
There's no up there. It is literally 6 people sitting down around dinner. And I've debated a no phones policy, but so far it hasn't been a problem.
Awesome. Man, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining. And
thanks for having me. It's been a
pleasure.
Our
paths cross in the near future. Wow, what an incredible conversation. Thank you, Danny, for coming on the show today. We took a deep dive into the world of innovation and entrepreneurship and leadership with Danny Nathan, the visionary CEO behind Apollo 21. We talked about building a culture of innovation to solving complex business challenges with cutting edge technology. Danny shared some powerful insights that any leader or entrepreneur can learn from. And his approach to customer-centric problem solving and navigating fear of change and maintaining integrity in business relationships is something we can all aspire to in our own journeys. And I really appreciated the insights that he dropped. If this episode has inspired you to rethink how you approach innovation or leadership, don't stop here. Head over to apollo21.io to learn more about the transformative work that Danny and his team are doing over there. It's refreshing to hear these insights from someone that is doing just amazing things across the planet. As always, thank you for tuning into the Branding Laboratory. Don't forget to subscribe, leave me a review. I want to know how I'm doing, and follow us on social media to keep the conversation going. And if you're ready to take your business to the next level, you can find me. That's right, Deevo, yours truly, at thebrandstoryteller.com for more insights, resources, blogs, intellectual thought seed, thought leadership, all sorts of things that we can help you tell your brand story a little bit better to connect with the right audience. So if you're struggling to find who that audience is, if you're struggling to better understand how you can show up in your best light, I'm going to help you tell that story. So check me out on thebrandstoryteller.com. Until next time, stay real, keep innovating, and lead with purpose, my friends. I'll see you on the next episode of the Branding Laboratory. Peace. Thanks for tuning in to the Branding Laboratory. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Connect with us on social media for more branding tips and insights. And remember, your story matters. Until next time, keep building and sharing your unique brand story. I'll see you soon.